Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this month's First Friday webinar. I've got a couple reminders before we get started. In the email you received today, you have a link to both the handouts and the quiz. So if you'd like to refer to the handouts, those are available to you. And please remember to take the quiz by Sunday night so that I can get started grading those quizzes on Monday. PDH certificates will be emailed out to you in the next couple of weeks. And if you have any questions, you know where to reach me. Our presenter today is Michael Lorentz of Knight EA Incorporated. And he is going to be talking about the Washington Park bridges here in Springfield. And I have a special treat. He's here in the office with me, which I am spoiled. Sorry, guys. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to him.
Thanks, Courtney. Like Courtney said, I'm Michael, and I'm going to be walking you guys through what we've been working on with this Washington Park Bridges project. There we go. Alrighty, so to start with, giving you guys just kind of an overview of what all we're going to be talking about today. Going to go over where all we've been working at. Wanted to start with the NPDES permit and the changes that were proposed, a little bit about the construction sequence we've been following, and then a little bit of more detail about the Channel X, especially going into the bridge foundations because there was some interesting stuff there, assembling the precast bridge units, and then a little bit about some of the public interactions and visitors to the site. And I was informed that the quiz, like Courtney said, is available via handout, so even though the slides are here, you'll need to use that handout to get graded. All right, work locations. This is a picture of the Washington Park here in Springfield, Illinois. The area I've circled is kind of our work zone. Here we go. So we've got an island connected by a path that we were paving. We've got a bridge down here at the south end, a bridge here at the north end, and then this western half of the lagoon is the portion that we're doing the Channel X on. Here's a sketch I modified one of the plan sheets, kind of showing where those kind of four distinct work zones are. The Spillway and North Bridge, that Channel X, the South Bridge, and then this path that we worked on. So here are some before kind of pictures. This is that North Bridge and Spillway. You can see it kind of in a normal after a rain event. Here is that multi-use path that connects kind of from the north to south bridges through that lagoon. Had another picture here this would have been in June. We got a period of dry weather and you could kind of see the existing channel a bit better. One last picture of the North Bridge, kind of on the north side of that North Bridge when we were starting work, and then the South Bridge. NPDES. As it says on the slide, the original plan was that all of that Channel X and foundation work was just to be done during low flow conditions, using cofferdams to kind of move the water from one half of the channel to the other and to keep the area where we were working on dry as we worked. The contractor had a plan that he proposed at the pre-construction meeting, and we all agreed, sounded like a good one, got approved. Block off that West Jacksonville Branch, which is that river that feeds into the West Lagoon. Block that off 200 feet upstream of the South Bridge and pump the water into the East Lagoon and out of the East Lagoon around the North Bridge back into the West Jacksonville Branch. I'll show you that here with this slide. Okay, so you can kind of see this is where we had the road closed off at the start of this work where we'd be working on these two bridges, and then their plan is to install a dam, do an inlet with pumps, pump the water into this east half of the lagoon. They'd seal it off more or less, so that the water can't flow back. But then you could dewater this area while the water flows from upstream through the East Lagoon and then from a pump to the other side of our work location. All right, getting into their overall plan and the construction sequence. One of the requirements imposed on us by the park is that either the bridges or that multi-use path needed to be open at all times. Now that's just, if you go back and look, the reason for that is that they have a great big circuit that's used by walkers and bikers and for different park events, a whole bunch of different things. And they either need to be able to do this complete circuit or at least be able to cut across on the path to be able to do that circuit throughout the park. That was one of their requirements. We couldn't be working on both that multi-use path and the bridges at the same time and cut off that loop. So their order they decided on was to knock out the multi-use path first, then they'd worry about the water diversion, the removals, foundations and channel X, and then, of course, setting these precast structures, bolting them together and backfilling. And then also have just a little bit on where we're at today, because the project is still ongoing. Okay, started with multi-use path. Got a couple pictures here from pre-construction, just have survey stakes there in that picture. One of the days where we were just starting to pave, they started out in the middle. They're standing kind of on that wider island part along the multi-use path. This is looking off to the south. Just some of the, kind of at the end of one of the days of paving. And then us pouring up a little hill there at the south end of this path. And then this was one of the finishing touches, adding all we required was a temporary lighting system, but the contractor decided that it was more cost effective to provide us a permanent lighting plan than to provide temporary lighting. So we have a temporary lighting system to remain in place that everyone agreed was satisfactory. Park District was pretty happy to get that. All right, multi-use path shoulder. This is one of the issues we've had with the project. The contractor finished his paving and installing that aggregate shoulders by 7/22, and just 2 days later, 7/24, we had a pretty large rain event. The water really builds up quickly in this West Jacksonville Branch. It has a lot of drainage area. So on the 24th, a lot of this shoulder is washed away. The contractor redid this work under T&M, and then we had another storm event less than a month later, washed away these aggregate shoulders again pretty substantially, and that is how the shoulders have kind of been left to this point. We have a plan, but they have not yet done the work of using some plastic grid and CA6 to take care of it. So let's see. This is a picture restoring the shoulders after that first rain event, or I think, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. This was just them installing the aggregate shoulder for the first time. My apologies. But you can see, I think it was a 18-inch wide aggregate shoulder at the base for that 6-inch deep sidewalk. Okay, here's that first storm. I just sketched this up to kind of document the damage. The blue areas are where we had minor displacement, some but not all of our stone washed away, and then those couple of red highlighted areas were significant, nearly all or all of the stone being moved by the storm event. Here's a couple pictures from that. Obviously there's driftwood and seaweed kind of things. Water was flowing right over top of this multi-use path. And you can see kind of in the foreground there just how much of this aggregate that was in a nice, neat shoulder has now been washed downhill into that West Lagoon. Again, some more storm damage pictures. And then quick summary of that second storm. This one did even more damage, as you can see with all of the red and how long some of these stretches of significant damage work. And again, here's some pictures. You can see the full 6 inches, and it looks to me like this was a place where the sidewalk was deeper than 6 inches. You can see the entire depth of sidewalk exposed. All of that aggregate's been shoved down the hill. Water would flow across our multi-use path, and as soon as it would come over the top of that, it would just, that little bit of fall was enough that it was carrying the stone away from the sidewalk. So, more pictures kind of out in the middle, middle island area, and then this picture is up here near that north culvert. Again, just everything, full depth, got moved away. Okay, so after that, contractor moved on to worrying about his water diversion. This is just a repeat of that slide I already showed you, but this is where they're going to be installing that temp dam, pumping around to be able to safely dewater this area and work in it more easily. So here's a picture from August, installing that temp sheeting. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you guys. At the bottom of just about every slide, I just have a little calendar I made to try and help keep track. I wasn't able to keep all of my slides in chronological order, so I wanted to provide some sort of a marker to help you guys kind of visualize when we were doing this different work, since I grouped some of it more by type of work and kind of following one section of work from start to finish rather than keeping everything in chronological order time-wise. So just wanted to bring your attention to that. So here we are. They're installing those temporary sheet pile, and it's just to stop the water and be able to pump down everything downstream and then pump down things from upstream around our work zone. Here we are just about finished with installing those sheet pile that day. And then here is them just setting up the pumps to get started working. So you can see they've got a solid wall of sheet pile, the entire width of the channel, and then they're going to be setting up this 6-inch pump with a hose to take water in from here, pump it into that east lagoon, and then they'll be able to drain down this area and work in the riverbed. Structure removals. All right, so they started with the south bridge. They took off the handrails first because we're going to be reusing those, and then it was just total demolition. Here we are at the north bridge and that existing weir. They've started doing the removals, and you can see that this is what was that West Lagoon. It's now got most of the water out of it. What little bit was left has been seeping out as they were taking out the lip of that spillway. And then here they are another day, kind of finishing that or continuing that weir removal. As you can see, we got some rain, and this was the fastest way rather than pumping to let the water out of that West Lagoon. All right. After we got a hand on the water, they started working on channel excavation. Their original plan was that they would have a dozer running the length of that West Lagoon. He would cut down to the elevation that we were calling for in the plans and push all of that material down to one location so they could have a track hoe operator just sitting in one spot and just have one circuit for their trucks to run where they could load out trucks and haul away from that one location. Okay, August 11th. Everyone was hoping this would be a good plan, and the foreman went ahead and brought a track hoe out there to kind of dig some test holes and see what kind of soil was in this West Lagoon. So here are a couple of workers. They were taking before an existing survey of that west channel, and you can see how shallow it is too from the multi-use path there. And they brought their track hoe out, and within a matter of minutes, this is what happened. The track hoe sank all the way up to the glass. Obviously, the operator was quite scared. now it's kind of humorous because it was very scary at the time, but now it's kind of humorous looking back. You can see at this point he's been trying to dig himself out, but his tracks are completely underneath. It was quite an ordeal. It took most of the rest of the day to get that track hoe out of there, and it did sustain a bit of damage. So anyway, from that, they inferred that their original plan would not be able to work. They were going to have to devise a new one of how we're going to get all of that Channel X done from that West Lagoon. In the meantime, though, they went ahead and moved up to the north structure to start the removals up there. All right, so we brought up some track hose, and they've got the concrete breaker, and they're starting their removals for the North Bridge. Now this is the picture I walked up to, was just walking up to the side and took a picture of the removals, and then was looking at that track hoe, but sure enough, we had another issue. So in this case, all it is he had been working, it's a paved slope wall draining this water away from the weir, and this operator had been working on top of that, but all it took was one track flipping off the edge of that weir as he was trying to go up the slope, and that was enough. Even with one track on perfectly solid ground, that other track sank again, I think almost all the way to the glass on his cab. So very, very weak soils, just another confirmation of, just what poor, first of all, saturated silt soil that they had out there. Let's see, and then I think this is my last picture for this slide. Just kind of a picture of the removals nearing completion, breaking down those big chunks and loading out all of that rubble from the north structure and spillway. Channel X. So as you can see in my little timeline down here, some of the stuff we were looking at was happening in August, and the North Bridge was happening in September. Channel X started back in August, kind of the end of August, and ran through the entire month of September. So end of August, they came up with that plan of how they were going to attack this Channel X. Instead of the track hoe that they had been using, they were going to rent one with a longer boom, a long stick track hoe. They were going to clear that entire west bank of the lagoon of brush. We had to talk with the park district about what plants and vegetation were acceptable to clear, and they were fine with us clearing, and which ones were part of their park and needed to be saved. So they cleared everything that they were allowed to clear in order to give themselves some working room. And then every 50 linear foot or so, they were going to take a handful of crane mats, and their operator was going to stick those out on this soft soil so that he could track out just a little bit into the lagoon. There was no way to reach kind of the east edge of that lagoon from the side with the multi-use path that had just been paved, and that 6-inch PCC pavement. If you tried to put a piece of equipment, especially a track piece of equipment, we'd be destroying and having to redo a bunch of work. So decided that their only access was from that west bank. They were going to have to do all their work from the west bank, and even with that, the longest stick track hoe they could rent, they would still need to be sitting out into the lagoon a little bit in order to reach the far bank, even with that long track hoe. So they're going to core out everything within reach from each one of those mats whenever they set up, and then they had to cut into the slope of that west bank in a couple of places to create a temporary haul road, just because that kind of that west bank was pretty steep for their trucks to be running just on grass. And again, they'd be hauling sloppy, watery silt, so running on an angle, they were concerned for the safety of their truck drivers, so had to create a haul road as well there. All right, so these are between August 24th and September 26th. Here we are kind of at the start of that. You can see this is maybe the second day or so of them working, but he's put a whole series of crane mats out here so that he can actually track down the slope, sit just a little bit out into the west bank. Even with those crane mats, though, they were still sinking. It wasn't sinking like the disasters we'd seen so far, but I saw a number of times where he would have to come back onto the bank and put a second or even a third layer of crane mats to try and distribute his weight enough to get a solid position from which to work on his channel X. So here's kind of at the beginning of the project. We got one traco working here, one here taking care of what he can reach, and then you can see, though, the normal traco, this is max reach for that long stick traco. Even sitting out here, he can just barely reach that far side. So the normal traco was really only good for kind of cleaning up the footprint behind what the long stick could reach. This is some of that tree protection we had to set up that was not anticipated. Just all of these beautiful trees out there. It's a park, so a lot of concern for the aesthetics and keeping these trees beautiful. You can see where they're setting up some marks, trying to channel their trucks so they don't disturb any more of this slope than is necessary. Just sort of picture, since they couldn't haul out from one spot, though, they still had to have a number of different access points all along this west bank where their trucks were running circuits. And again, good picture of all this different tree protection we had to use. This picture I thought was interesting just because you can kind of see he's set up a few of his crane mats. He's now using his bucket at its max length to see if he's moved far enough or too far down from his last position, seeing if he can still reach to take out this chunk here, and also to make a mark so that he can visualize how far down he can move his mats for the next point to load out from. And then this is kind of the end of September. We're finally getting done with this channel X. You can see they're continuing to run circuits down this whole west bank, and up here is that north bridge footprint, and this is what will become the weir. We'll get to that in a couple slides here. All right, before we get up to that north bridge, though, I wanted to start with, we found some pretty interesting stuff hidden underground with this project. Starting with, wanted to catch you guys up with where we were when we started that first test pile. We started with the south bridge, southern structure on the west side. Production plan length for all of our production pile was expected to be 26 feet. That was based off soil borings. 26 feet should be a very conservative, probably expecting to have 4 or 5 feet of cutoff length with that expected length. Test pile drove to 21 foot below the cutoff, which was right in line with what our soil borings had told us to expect. And so IDOT approved a production pile length of 25 feet. Here we go with that first, we drove that first production pile. Obviously, it's far longer than we drove our first test pile. The production pile will only be that 25 foot long, but I think our test pile was, 45 foot long that they brought out. So much longer than the production pile will be. Which brings us to trying to core out the bottom of this south structure west footing. The operators had been working from up on the bank, but they were told they weren't being efficient enough, so the operator tracked down, took crane mats, tracked down into kind of the south end west footing area in order to reach this area and core out, and this happened. It took less than 20 minutes, I think, that he was able to work, but even just the movement of turning back and forth and the vibration of his engine running was enough that he punched through what little crust was there, even with I think he was still sitting on a couple of crane mats, not the full width, but I think he had a couple of large pieces of wood down there, kind of the remains of crane mats that he was trying to use. And once again, sunk very badly. This was actually, we lost the rest of that day and the next day, the majority of the next day of production, trying to get this track hoe, oh my goodness, cutting a huge swath out and trying to get that track hoe out from the bottom of this hole. All right, and then finally, so that was back on the 22nd, had that big disaster. The next week, started working on our production pile on the 27th and 28th. Got a pretty interesting result. This is one of my favorite pictures from the project. As you can see, so this is that south ridge on the west side. So down here is kind of the south end. You can see that's the top of our piling right there. And it stair steps down. Well, this is the test pile, but the same height would be about right here on that test pile. And it continues to stair step all the way down. So let's look into that a little bit. All right, so that test pile, it told us the same thing that our soil boring had, but when we drove all of our production pile, we got this stair step pattern you see. Based on this, it seems that we're sitting on top of a sloping, we were sitting on shale there, we believe, for that bedrock that we drove to. Drove all of these pile essentially to the same resistance, near to refusal, and our cutoff links vary pretty uniformly as you go from one side to the other. Up here we had right around 14 foot of cutoff length, and then by the time you get to that, the last one in the wing on that north side, we only had 1.6 foot of extra to cut off. So a lot closer than we were comfortable with, and no way to tell that from just that one soil boring that we were going to be on a sloping layer, and then had no indication when our test pile drove to the same length. Had no idea, and it was close, but no splices needed. It ended up working out. Just a bit of a interesting picture. All right, so now we're up into September. They started working up at that north end. They've cored out. They've done all their removals. They've cored out their footings, and they're ready to drive the permanent sheet piling. This is going to be the on the inside of the new weir that we're going to be putting in to replace that weir we already took out at the north bridge. Here we go. We've got the area cut and a little bit of aggregate placed just as a working surface for them, and they're starting to drive their sheet. They've got a survey point here, and they've measured out a radius, and now they're installing these permanent sheet piling. This is from, I think, the second or third day, where we've now got most of that sheet piling in that'll serve as kind of the backbone of our weir. And then this is installing the shear stud connectors so that the concrete we pour around it will have the appropriate amount of connection to the permanent sheet piling that are inside of it. All right, and now this picture is jumping, just while we're on the topic of this spillway, wanted to go ahead and jump forward and show you guys February, where we finally came back to this work. The last thing that went in there is this 6-inch squares wire mesh that's serving as our reinforcement. And then here it is all formed up. They had to put a walkway on the inside because the thing's so tall for safety reasons. Constructed themselves a walkway to be able to do this pour more easily. Oh, I thought I also had a picture of it for you. Oh well. All right, so that was the weir. After that, wanted to talk to you guys about going back to piling. The next piling we did after that south bridge on the west side was we moved up to the north bridge. The south bridge on the east side is a spread footing, so we're not going to use any piling there. And for a couple of reasons that I'm going to get to later, that ended up being the last one we did. But for now, we've done the south bridge on the west side, and we move up to the north bridge to do both of these footings. They start with a test pile at that north bridge on the west side. Again, we're only expecting the driven length to be 26 foot. Our soil borings at the north bridge were very similar to the south bridge, same depth down before we expected to hit that sandy shale that we would be driving into for refusal. And when we drove this one, our test pile went 29.6 feet from the cutoff elevation down to where we actually hit the sandy shale there. Now, keeping in mind what we had just seen a few weeks before at the south bridge on the west side with that sloping shale layer, a almost 3.5 foot difference between a soil boring that was just 50 feet away and what we actually found when we drove this test pile. It was cause for some concern. We had some conversations with IDOT, brought them up to speed with this stair-step pattern we'd seen at the south end, and showed them the 3.5 foot difference between that conservative. Again, we were expecting to have 5 foot of cutoff length with that plan production length of 26 foot. But with this being more than that, just wanted to talk things through with IDOT. Sure enough, IDOT agreed. There was a lot of uncertainty. They gave us some soil borings from an adjacent project, Fayette Avenue Bridge, which is just 100 feet north of that north bridge. Its soil borings were right in that range of we would expect to hit it, hit this sandy shale about 27-ish feet below our cutoff elevation. But they went ahead and approved a second test pile. We did a second test pile on that west side. Our first test pile was kind of at the southmost end of that abutment, so we moved to the other end, the northmost end, and drove that second test pile. It again drove right into that 29 foot, very similar to that 29 foot 6. So this time we're pretty confident that we're not on a sloping layer again. We can just go ahead and add on a little bit of length to be safe. They approved a 35 foot order length, and we went ahead and drove those. Here's a picture. This one, no surprises. Let's see. I don't remember which one was the test pile. I was thinking it was 1 or 2 more down this way. But as you can see, not much variance, not nearly like the other one. It's not some sort of uniforming slope. It's just pretty similar driven lengths, with our cutoff elevation being somewhere right in here. So pretty comfortable with that one. All right. So then we moved on to the last footing where we needed to drive pile up, that north bridge. We just did the west side, moving over to the east side now. Again, drove a test pile, very, very similar to what we got on the west side, 29.7 feet. Approved the same, IDOT approved the same delivered length, and we drove this one again without any major issues. This pile is I think the last one that we were installing, and it's the one we're still working on here in the picture, but you can see just a little bit of variance, but for the most part, they all hit that same refusal at about the same elevation down. And again, had no need for slices or anything. Our cutoff was right in here somewhere, and all of them were fine. Okay. Moving back to the south structure, that west side that we've had done for a while, they went ahead and cut off their piling, installed all their rebar, formed it, and poured it. This brings us through about the middle of October. And here you can see just after they've stripped the forms and started to backfill up against the forms, this is just left over from their cofferdam. They set them on top of that west foundation to get them up out of the way while they were working. All right, after that we moved back to the north bridge. They worked on first the west and then the east footings. Here we are, we're forming up, got all our rebar in place. This is their cofferdam to kind of keep any water, be able to create a sump, and keep the water out of the area where the guys are actually working. But they've got all their rebar in place. They're putting in their chamfer now. And then this is a picture once we had it stripped of that west footing, or pile cap. Pile cap is probably a more accurate term for it. And then this is moving over to that east side. Same thing. They put in barrier walls, kind of as a cofferdam, but mostly just to brace against for their forms. Forms, rebar, and then you can see they're in progress right now of pouring the concrete for that west pile cap. All right, south structure, the only thing left at this point is that east footing for the south structure. So the reason that this one got pushed off to the last is because of a differing site condition. This was first discovered middle of October, about the time we were working at the south bridge on the west side. We were expecting a flat layer of shale, and on that east side, because of the soil boring that was taken on the east side, we were expecting that shale layer to be more shallow on the east side and be able to do a spread footing. They started digging a little bit, and what they found was for about half the width of the abutment, that shale layer was in fact at a high enough elevation or higher where they would actually need to do some rock X, or was still at an elevation where they could build right on top of it. But then for the north half of that abutment and then the wing wall off to the northeast, the stone plunged and definitely was deeper than where we anticipated it. So we're going to have to do some T&M work. Couldn't agree on a unit price, just a lot of risk. So we went ahead with that work as T&M. They cored down to actually find the shale, and then they backfilled with stone, CA6 type material. That was all. We finally started doing that work the week of November 11th. Should have some pictures coming up here. And then we poured this thing the 17th and 18th. So here we go. This is them still exploring and finding where that shale layer is. Over here, we've just got a skim coating over the top of it, but all of this is really solid shale. And then it plunges, probably a good 4 feet or more. And then I think this is pretty close to or at where the shale actually came back up underneath where this wing wall is going to go. All right, so that was coring down. Here we are backfilling. You can see they scraped off that shale layer that they're going to be building on top of. Actually had to do some rock X to bring this area down to the correct elevation for the bottom of their foundation. And then we're backfilling with this CA6 material up to that same elevation. And then once we got to that point, we can be off T&M and build the rest of the bridge per plan. So here we are. They filled in this whole area as T&M, and then they had removed just a little bit more of that rock X, just a little bit deeper than where they needed to, so they backfilled this area at their cost up to the plan elevation, and then this area over here, they just dug down right to the correct rock elevation. And then here we are in the middle of November. Still had good enough weather, and we poured this spread footing in 2 parts. You've kind of got the actual spread footing itself, and then the second part will be pouring that stem wall. And here's them. We've got that spread footing portion formed, or poured, and they're constructing their forms for the stem wall. All right, this brings us to December. We finally got all of our foundations done. We're up out of the mud just a little bit, backfilled, and we're ready to set these structures into place. One of the cool things about this project is that all of these structures and wing walls are all precast, both the north and south bridge. So for 2 days in a row here, December 1st and 2nd, a whole bunch of organization. These pieces are going to come in on semi. So here we are at the north bridge. Semis would come in. They're all scheduled a certain amount of time apart, so that they arrive, and this crane can pick them and place them without too much material being on site at any one time. getting in each other's way. You can see they're setting that first arch into place. And I think the second semi is already backed up into place. By the time they had this first one hooked up and actually are getting it set into place, the second semi is backing up into place. Went pretty smoothly overall. Here we are setting that. Here we are about the third arch piece. All you can see now is kind of the top of those pile caps. This is at that north bridge looking south. So we're looking at, here is that west pile cap, and the east pile cap, and then of course our permanent sheet piling for that weir wall. They're just starting to bolt these sections together. They bolt 3 arch units together here, and then they'll set 3 more arch units here and bolt them together, and then bolt that group to the wing walls and this group to the wing walls as well here. Let's see. Here we are. As you can see, it was a very long day. This is obviously artificial lighting, so they could keep working. Worked pretty late that night. I think 9 or 10 o'clock, both December 1st and 2nd. But at this point, they've got all of their barrels into place, and they've set the 3 chunks of these head walls for one side, and now they're working on the 3 chunks of head wall for this near side. I think this is the north side we're standing on right here for this picture. Here we are just a little bit later in the evening. We've got 1 wing wall, and you can see the cast in with the wing wall, these tiebacks. And at this point, we've got all 3 of these head wall, and we're working on the last head wall for that north side. All right, just about done for the evening. Set one of the last wing walls into place, and here we go. That last or second to last wing wall, setting it into place. Okay, basically same thing, but now for the south bridge. Second day of this going on, got that crane mobilized down to the other end. Don't envy those operators. They had another crew that came in as we were finishing up at 10 o'clock and tore down the crane at the north end, brought it down to the south end, and got it set up. And I understand that was another, a full shift worth of work to move it from one place to the other and get it reassembled, taking on and off all those counterweights and things like that. Anyway, so it's set up. We're ready to go first thing in the morning, and they've got trucks backing up again to where the crane is, and it's picking them and setting that first arch into place. Here's that spread footing. You can see the top of that stem wall. Everything else is backfilled. And then that is the pile cap for the south bridge on the west side. Here's a picture kind of now instead of being standing over in this area, I'm now standing on the west side. You can see where the semis are backing down the road. The structure is getting picked up by the crane. They pick it up, set it over, rehook, and then set it into place. All right, here we are later that day. We've got all of the barrel pieces placed, and you can see they're starting to bolt these pieces together. The way these come out, along one arch, you'll have 2 holes already pre-drilled. You'll line up that fastener to it, and then you'll have to hand drill these other 2 holes, just because if you brought them out with all of these holes already pre-drilled, you'd never get the spacing to work quite right. Better just to have one set pre-drilled. You can go ahead and use those, and then you just drill the other side to match. All right, here we are. They've got all their barrels in the background here, and I believe this is picking up one of the head wall pieces, getting ready to install head walls. Here we are, again, turning into quite a late night. Worked till 9 or 10 o'clock that night again, setting these wing walls into place. This southeast wing wall took quite a bit of work. Just for whatever reason, it just wanted to tilt a little bit, and they had to do quite a bit of work with their shims to get it to actually sit correctly, plumb. All right. I think that's all I have to say. All right, so at that point, bring us up to mid-December. We've got the precast units all in place. Kind of all that's left with these structures now is to bolt them all together, And then very important is sealing all the joints. Grouting under the wing walls, grouting between some things, joint seals, and backfilling the structures. Backfilling being very important. We talked about this with the precast and with some of the structural guys, that the backfill is part of the structure. You can't deliver these things and have them sitting without that backfill. It puts a strain on them, so we need to get them backfilled at least partially up the length of that vertical part of the arches very quickly. I think they were saying within 48 hours they want us to backfill at least halfway up the arches, just in order to keep from straining these precast pieces. All right, so here we are. This is some of the assembling that they did like while we were actually flying these all into place. You can see here these connections I was talking about between the barrels, a couple of them. You can see, so this is the head wall piece, just another view of it. It's got this L shape to it, and then they've got pre-drilled holes through the collar, of that head wall, and down into, they have the pre-drilled holes corresponding to it in the arches. So you put a threaded rod in there, great big washer and nuts, and then the thing that the foreman's working on right here, right now, is you've got the same pair of pre-drilled holes, but then correspondingly you won't have pre-drilled holes on the other side of that angle piece, so that you can actually field drill those and it'll actually fit correctly together. So he's working on that right now, drilling the holes and putting some more of those bolts in. Before they even unclip it, they wanted to have several of those connector pieces already in place. So here we are with some more of the joint seals. Don't remember for sure, but I think this is the north bridge on the west side. You can see that gap between each one of these precast arch pieces. We put in this butyl rope into the joint, and they actually had to redo this work. They were supposed to put a primer on to make sure that their mastic tape actually stuck for a good long period. So they actually had to take off that, prime it, and then redo these strips. But the reason I wanted to show this picture is it shows kind of all the steps. You've got your butyl rope, missing is the primer. They'll come back and do that. Primer, and then your tape, and then grouting. They've got a little pump here. They stick it into the back of the abutment, and they pump grout in. And then the way that we check to make sure there are no voids is I would go in on the inside and wait to be able to see that grout flowing out of the keyway on the inside. And that's when they'd know that they had enough grout to actually stop and move a little further down, down the structure. One of the other things is grout was required in this space between the precast tiebacks and the wing wall. And again, you can see all the bolts. These right here are actually tension wires. They run with these plates from one side of the arch to the other, and until we get this whole area backfilled a good bit, until we're at least up to the height of those tension wires, not allowed to cut those things, but eventually they'll be cut, and these holes will actually then serve as weep holes for the structure. Okay, so here they are backfilling. So at this point they've already, I think at this point they're getting ready to cut those cables. So they're trying to backfill up high enough and compact it in so that they have a good amount of support for these precast structures when they go to cut the cables. And then here is, after they've cut the cables, right in this area is where those former cable holes are that are now going to serve as weep holes. And they've got filter fabric and going for a 2-foot by 2-foot wedge of open graded stone to serve as a French drain. This is just backfilling. We're backfilled up to the top, or where the top of that vertical face the precast units are. This is that north bridge kind of looking off to the west across the structure. We got the tester out there testing to make sure we have good compaction on this structure backfill. And again, you can see all these different connections between the wings and the head wall, the wings and the barrels, and between all the barrels and head walls. And then this is the south bridge, kind of at the end of the year. I think this is about December or January, and we've got it completely backfilled with all of the structure backfill, getting ready to do our sub-base and pave. We were hoping before they shut down for the year, but nature dictates that. All right. And then here we are. This is when we picked back up in February, had to shut down for the year and came back, and they graded out their sand, and now they're putting in 8 inches of aggregate base course for under the roadway. All right. So at this point, pretty much brings us up to date. As I said earlier, it is an ongoing project. Right now, we're still, at this point, we have finished all of the removals. The time I was putting together this PowerPoint presentation still wasn't, but here in the last week or two, we've finished the last little bit of removals. We've been placing just the last little bit of that structure backfill that was needed, and then our 8-inch the sub-base. And we're actually getting ready to pave one of those roadways, hopefully on Monday. Also here in February, since we started back up, we formed up that weir, put in that wire mesh that I showed you earlier in the presentation, and then we poured that weir February 17th. And then one of the ongoing projects that they just were wrapping up today was installing some storm sewer and drainage structures, and then we've been grading and starting to construct the spillway. Going to have a paved spillway from that weir at the north bridge, and that spillway will run underneath that north bridge with all of that area being paved. So working on grading and putting in the aggregate base course for that comes. All right, last thing, kind of the last thing I wanted to cover was public interactions. The first thing about working in a park, especially one where it's very much open to the public and has a lot of people come through it on a daily basis, is a lot of observers and a lot of people just with questions. Hard to quantify, but a lot of people use that multi-use path every day. Kind of just a little aside here, but we would typically have at least a couple of people, and depending on what type of work we were doing, as many as a crowd of 20 plus, especially if we were driving piling or installing that permanent sheet piling, or if we were doing a concrete pour. We would often get whole groups of people that are standing over there, and just I guess part of how I've seen my job is to interact with them and just be polite and answer questions, get a lot of the same question over and over of when's it going to be done and how close are you guys to having the road open or the bridge open. But just part of the job, they have a lot of questions, and just try to interact with them politely. Let's see. One of the downsides of all of this curiosity and interaction is it's been very difficult for the contractor to actually keep people out of the work zone. I know this is a project or a problem with many, if not all, work zones, but completely disregard signage, often won't even pay attention, even if the area is being currently worked in and the workers are yelling at them. Often these people try or succeed in cutting through these work zones anyway. Definitely will move or break down barricades and tape, and the contractors tried an ever-escalating series of signs and tape and rope and things like that to try and keep people actually out of the work zones. But the worst ones have actually been once we had the sand over the structures and left it for the winter, that every time that I or the contractor would come out, it seems like just about, regularly, people would actually move the barricades and drive across the structures with just sand. So we thought that was pretty adventurous and rather foolish. But we can't monitor it all the time. The contractor wasn't even working out there, so people did what they wanted to do, I guess. All right, and then also had some news articles and suggestions. A couple of those things have just been, vandalism out at the park. The only way that that impacted our project was someone took a couple of the fire extinguishers off of the equipment that was out there and just made a mess with them. What else? We had a couple different recommendations, had a news article that was asking that we provide a whiteboard out there where someone could just provide updates that people could read about the construction progress, but we talked about that one, but a whiteboard out there just seemed like it was inviting all sorts of issues with people wanting to draw or write whatever they felt like writing on that whiteboard. So decided to reject that idea for a couple of reasons. And then, one of the other fun ones was we got an email from a lady who was going to get married out at the park. They schedule things like that. It's still being used all the time. And she sent us some pictures that the backdrop for her wedding in the little gazebo she was going to be using included our crane with its mast arm sticking way up in the air, and that would kind of be in the background of every one of her wedding pictures. So brought it up to the contractor, and they were a good sport and worked with us. And for that weekend, we made a real effort. They brought out some green tarps and covered up a lot of the ugly equipment that we couldn't move, lowered the boom on that crane and things like that. So that was a fun one. And then just a number of visitors from IDOT, including the bridge department. They came out to see the south structure, all of those precast pieces get flown into place and bolted together. All right, and then these 5 slides, I guess, won't really apply. You'll have that as part of your handouts, the presentation quiz. And with that, I think I'm done. Opening it up if there are any questions that you guys have and wanted us to answer. I'm here, and also I have Jeff Antonacci, one of the designers here. If you have any sort of question for either of us, just let us know.
Looks like we've gotten one already.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question, did you know water flowed over the path in heavy rains before starting that part of the project?
Good question. The answer is yes. The way I heard it described from the Park District is that significant rainstorms have always been a problem flooding over that multi-use path. Some rainstorms, the particularly heavy ones, would actually cause the area to flood so badly that the water would reach the bottom or even the top of the bridges, which are several feet higher. So it has always been a problem. The main thing that we wanted to address with this project, the new roadways are actually a little bit higher, and kind of the clear distance to the bottom of those arches is quite a bit higher than the previous bridges, and the roadway itself is a little bit higher than the existing roadway and elevation for the bridges there. So we made it a little bit stronger storms will be needed before we have to worry about pavement overtopping. But yes, we had to leave the multi-use path essentially just a couple inches higher or at the same elevation where we found it. So it's always been a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem, unfortunately.
Second question is this one.
Let's see. Very nicely done. Used to go regularly to this park with my kid 36 years ago. Would you be able to send us pictures of the finished project?
Absolutely. I think if the company would be willing to share those, I'm more than willing to send them out to participants. So we'll work together and get those out to you once the project wraps up.
Absolutely. All right. Got just a couple more questions here. Did this project include any sedimentation structures separate from the lagoon? Let's see. We did dig, let's see, 2 sediment pits during the course of this construction. One of them was planned, And one of them was the contractor at his expense. He decided he needed another one. So we did do 2 of those just to try and catch some of that sediment in our project limits. Let's see. What is the anticipated opening of the roadway over the bridges? This is the question I get the most often by far. All right. So the answer is December of last year. First it was November of last year, and then December of last year. And now the answer is we're paving the North Ring Road with any luck on Monday, and the South Ring Road about a week later. So with luck, we could finally have pavement on these things in just a week or 2, or 2 weeks for both bridges. But there is still quite a bit of cleanup and yeah. Okay, Jeff saying he would guess about April 1. So, all right, thank you guys very much for the questions. If there's not any other ones, wait. All right, I think that's all the questions. All right, thank you guys very much for your participation. Appreciate all you guys signing in to hear this. So.
All right, well, everyone, enjoy your weekend. Hopefully you are seeing some sun as we are here in Springfield. And we will hopefully talk to you guys next month. Don't forget to take your quiz. The link to that quiz is in the email you got from me this morning. So if you have any questions, let us know. And we'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys.